Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here in New York, and for the almost 500 people who registered to live stream this event. I want to say welcome. We're so happy to have an esteemed panel with us today. Before we get there, we have a special guest. So give us about 5 minutes, and I'd like to invite my colleague, John, to come over and introduce that special guest. Thanks, John.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is John Hassett. I'm the VP of Sales here at Dice. Before we get to our meat of the program, I just wanted to introduce one of our newest partners here, Streetwise Partners, which is a nonprofit based in New York and Washington, D.C. That really helps bridge the opportunity gap through mentorship. And so as part of tonight's event, we wanted to introduce them to help increase their awareness. And in lieu of swag, we are donating any money we would have spent to that to Streetwise Partners. So we appreciate the partnership with you guys, and really looking forward to hearing more about what you all do.
John, we appreciate the introduction, and it's nice to be here and for Dice to be representing us. My name is Ori Balayesh. I'm the Corporate Engagement Manager with Streetwise Partners, and like John said, we're here to just talk to you more about who we are, what we do, who we serve, and how you can become part of Streetwise Partners. So I believe we have slides, but if they're not up, that's okay. So just to give you a little bit of background of Streetwise Partners, we were founded in 1997, so we've been around for about 26 years. We are based in New York City and serve New York City and Washington, D.C., as well as Detroit, Michigan. Basically, our mission, the steadfast belief in equity. So we all know that, you can go to the next slide, but we all know that when it comes to talent, that is equally distributed, whatever background you are from, demographics, experience. But what's usually not equally distributed is the opportunity, right? So we all know that your ability to get in front of someone and your opportunity can be highly affected by your education, your family, your parents' education, and vice versa. So where Streetwise comes in is that we took this as an important mission for us to bridge that opportunity gap through mentorship in our program. So we work with underrepresented communities and immigrant communities and pair them with mentors and executives such as yourself to get them those professional skills and those soft skills that they need to accelerate themselves and get in front of those opportunities that they usually would not get otherwise. You can go to the next slide. So why this is important, if we talk a little bit more in the American job market, the hard part for anyone in a community is finding that opportunity, especially those job postings that you post generally for those high-level positions. We know that about 70% of those jobs are not publicly posted, right? So you can't find them on any job board, any job listing. You have to know someone, and that goes to the 80% of jobs that are actually filled are through networking and word of mouth. And so for anyone in a position where they feel like they've been marginalized or they don't have that same opportunity, that is hard for them to get that same type of access that someone else might be able to get. Go to the next slide. Why we focus so much on mentorship is because we found that having a mentor, that is the tipping point. We know that from our people that have been through our program, about 56% of adults credit their mentors for helping them excel into their careers. But we also know that about 67% of young adults never really recall having a mentor or someone they can rely on to help them navigate that job market. You can go to the next slide. So I'm now going to hand it over to our colleague Ivan, who's going to be able to speak a little bit more about our clients specifically and the program that we run.
Thank you, Ori. My name is Ivan Vasquez. I'm the Talent Service Coordinator at Streetwise. I myself was a mentee of the program, so I went through the 13 weeks. And now I was able to really transition to not having an opportunity to be part of staff at Streetwise. So I'm really excited to give my personal overview and, of course, the clients that we serve. Within Streetwise, we serve our clients are diverse backgrounds. One of them are if a student is in pursuit of a bachelor's degree or associate's degree, or already obtained it. Additionally, we are also open to clients who come from diverse education backgrounds in the sense of perhaps obtaining a high school degree, but also getting a certification. Additionally, we also work with skilled immigrants. Next slide, please. Within our program, there's 13 weeks and it's in 2 phases. The first phase is the career navigation phase, where you work, a mentor is paired with a mentee, and you work with them with 13 weeks, but it's 11. Within those 11 weeks, you do one-to-one sessions, such as a resume review, interview prep, or creating an online presence, such as LinkedIn. After you do the 13 weeks, the mentee becomes an alumni, in which they're part of my department, which is talent services, where they work with their mentors to execute everything they learned from the program into their job search. Also, by working with talent services, we provide support with resources, exclusive job opportunities, and of course, resources and support. Next slide. So additionally, not only is it beneficial for the mentee, but for the mentors. This is a great opportunity for mentors to become an advocate for their mentee. Additionally, it gives an opportunity to do coaching sessions and, of course, give that personal one-to-one support. We also believe that, in your career, during your early stages of career, you could be that mentor that perhaps you may have missed. So this is a great opportunity where you get to learn from your mentee, but you also get to learn as a mentor. Next slide, please. Pass it to Ori.
Yeah, so what's really great, and we could talk about all the opportunities that we try to bring front for our mentees and our mentors, but really it shows when you graduate the program. So we're really proud of the fact that our program, as Ivan said, it's 13 weeks, 11 weeks of coaching with 2 events that we'll get to in a second, but about 85% of the people, the mentees who enter our program graduate our program, which we're really proud of. And for both the mentee and the mentor, they make about 100 additional contacts through networking through our program, and which is really great because a lot of our mentees come in, they usually don't even have a LinkedIn profile. So like even just starting them out in that digital realm already gives them a leg up and continuing to grow their network professionally. Also, our 2 favorite figures here are, one, when they graduate our program and they get new jobs, we have an annual income growth of about 230%. So we get them in positions where they are going to get a starting salary increase, and the average is about $68,000, which we're really proud of, where they wouldn't have gotten if, at least for our perspective, if they weren't through our program. We're able to get them in front of those opportunities that have higher salaries. And most importantly, the success of our program is that something that IBIN does in talent services is that we ensure that they are getting employed after going through our program and still continually to work with our mentors. So after a year after graduating our program, 70% of our graduates have secured either an internship or full-time employment. So we're really, really proud of those statistics to just show that the Streetwise program does work and is continuing to grow. You can go to the next slide. So when Ivan was talking about our Streetwise mentor program, which is one-on-one mentoring with a Streetwise mentee, the application process to become a mentor, it's pretty simple. We have flyers here that you can take, and there's a registration, our QR code, that you can learn more about Streetwise and register for an information session. Basically, you can attend an information session, then we'll send you an application, you apply, then we request to have an interview with you. Now the interview is just to get to know more about you, so that when we do the next program cycle, we can pair you with a mentee that most aligns with your skill set. So we're not doing any algorithm or anything like that. We're physically taking pieces of paper and matching you with the mentee and the mentor who have the best experience, who maybe get the best out of this program and this mentorship. So it's really important that obviously that we go through that process so we're not wasting your time or the mentee's time. You can go to the next slide.
As Ori was saying, within the program, there's 13 weeks, but out of those 13 weeks, 2 sessions, the mentee will participate in 2 exclusive events. One of them is a mock interview day, in which volunteers could come into the space and they practice a mock interview. They bring in their updated resume that they developed during the program, and of course, a job description. So any recruiters who perhaps wants to meet our talent, this is a one-time event in case perhaps 13 weeks might be a bit of a time commitment for you to attend and get to meet our candidates. Additionally, we have Speed Networking Day in which our candidates come into the space similar to mock interview day, but they practice their elevator pitch.
And additionally from that, as we're doing our program, we are running other kind of workshops and other opportunities as well to volunteer. Again, because of the time commitment, if you want to just be able to do a one-off volunteer event to see how Streetwise works with our mentees, we do workshops outside of just speed networking and mock interviews. So we do custom events a lot of the time with our corporate partners, which hopefully, making an event with DICE as well. We do something like job function specific, like we're talking here today. About resume workshops, career exploration, imposter syndrome, anything that really is something that we think our mentees and our mentors can benefit from. We also have things called like coffee chat series, which are just informal, virtual 40-minute conversations about a specific topic where you can talk to mentees just about your life experience and about that specific conversation, as well as something like office hours. We kind of format it the same way. So there are a lot of opportunities, again, to volunteer with Streetwise that is not just through our program, but it is also through our volunteer opportunities as well. So you can go to our last slide here. So really, why join Streetwise? Well, it's really, for us, it's a great opportunity to just continue to grow our network, to help put these mentees in front of professionals such as yourself, and really give them those opportunities that, again, wouldn't be afforded to them unless they had a program like Streetwise. We really believe that it makes a lasting impact. It helps with the job security and employment growth. Again, our whole mission at Streetwise is to close that opportunity gap so we can create a more culturally diverse workforce. And so our hope is that you're able to see that there is a positive impact that Streetwise is making, and hopefully join us in any capacity that you can. And final slide, final slide has just our contact information. If you want to learn, reach out to us specifically. And again, we have flyers as well where you can, scan a QR code and be able to get more information from us as well. Thank you again for DICE for having us here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Look, I know that there are those of you in the room and those of you on the live stream, if our panelists want to come up and get settled, who love a great T-shirt or a nice piece of swag. We do have some DICE logo items that we pulled out of the vault now that we're back in real life. But in lieu of event-specific swag, and because at DICE, our passion is advocating for tech talent, diverse, life-changing, company-changing talent, it made more sense to us to invite Streetwise here to donate that money to them so that they can do all the wonderful things that they just talked about. So thank you again, Streetwise. My name's Amy Heidersbach. I've been with DHI Group and with DICE for 2 months. So I'm thrilled to be here and really humbled by the people sitting to my right. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We've got questions that some of you have posed to us in the registration process. We've got some questions that we as a panel have talked about in advance that we'd like to discuss openly with you. We will take questions live here, so just raise your hand when you're inspired to do so. We also are giving away a free virtual career fair. So if you haven't put your name in for that, it's at the front table. Please do so before you leave. And after the program, we'll have more networking time here in New York, and time will be allotted to follow up with you who are participating virtually. So thanks, everyone, for being here. Again, my name's Amy Heidersbach. That's me when I had bangs. I am far less interesting than our panelists. So why don't we start with our esteemed panelist at my far right, Gerry Crispin, if you wouldn't mind giving us a quick primer on who you are.
Who am I? I am a lifelong student of recruiting, probably the oldest one that you've seen in quite a while.
Gerry.
I have a number of different passions. One of them is community.
Sorry.
I am totally passionate about community and the extent to which we can understand how we can shift networks to communities. And I'm constantly trying to learn that. One of the ways I tried to learn that was to spend my 75th birthday at Burning Man. And since then, I've gotten about 100 people asking me, did I safely get out this year? But I wasn't there. So, you know, I had been there about 3 different times. So I spend my time wandering around the world, trying to figure out how we do things differently and how we can do things differently, and meeting some very interesting people along the way. The only other thing I would tell you about myself is that while I have a community of talent acquisition leaders that I nurture and work with, each year I take a delegation of CHROs and talent acquisition leaders to a different country. And we were the first delegation to Cuba, for example, in 60 years. And the first meeting we had was with the Minister of Propaganda. We've been to Singapore, Japan, India, China, and a number of other countries, and we always are learning things that basically tell us that the whole recruiting knowledge base, the body of knowledge, has to shift dramatically over the next few years. And hopefully, as part of our conversations, there'll be some interesting things that we can talk about.
Thank you, Gerry. So moving down the line, we are so happy to have Deborah Yarnall here. Welcome, Deborah. Please tell us about yourself.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Deborah Yarnall. I don't have as an exciting background as Gerry, but I am a lifelong learner as well. Love everything talent acquisition. I'm currently a talent acquisition consultant and advisor, which is just really fancy for unemployed. I was most recently over at Amazon Web Services as one of their senior managers for their centralized sourcing recruitment team. Had plenty of experience within tech, non-tech, been working within talent acquisition for 28 years and in leadership positions for 15 years. I'm excited to be here today because we're going to be talking about something that's really close to my heart, which is really candidate experience. And I know Gerry had already alluded to the fact that, you know, we have some issues that we need to figure out. We need problems to solve. And I think that, you know, all of us collectively here are going to hear from everybody on this panel what's going on in today's market and how can we collectively get together and make that change happen. So that's just a little bit about me.
Thank you, Deborah. George LaRocque, you're
Thank
up
you.
next.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm George LaRocque. I'm the founder and chief analyst at WorkTech. I've been in the industry for over 30 years. I started as a recruiter and worked from the staffing side to the employer side, ran a consulting firm that did much of that as well, moved on to the tech side, launched some of the market's biggest recruiting and HR tech brands over about a dozen years, and spent my time in go-to-market strategy, corporate development in those different environments. For the last dozen years or so, I've built what is now WorkTech, market analyst and advisory firm. So we're looking at the macro trends that are impacting the job market, impacting labor, looking at the growth capital that's coming into the HR tech and WorkTech space, looking at the tech trends, talking to buyers about what they're using, what's working, what isn't, what they're spending, what they're planning to spend, and talking to investors and connecting all of these dots for those different constituencies. So I'm excited to have this conversation, and it's always a pleasure to see some old friends.
Thank you, George. And last but certainly not least, Marcus, how about telling us who you are, what you're doing, and why you're excited to be here?
Firstly, how is everybody feeling right now? Are you hot? I feel like it's nice being in an air-conditioned room. So thanks to the DICE team for having me and putting on this session. Marcus Sawyerr, founder and CEO of a company called EQ Community. And we basically focus on really helping people get access to opportunities and empowering people to thrive, as well as working with companies that need to really remove all the friction from the hiring process, which stops them from being inclusive. So we work through that. My background, I spent last 20 years or so actually in the recruiting industry. I was at a company called careerbuilder.com for about 10 years. And then I led digital transformation for a company called the Adecco Group. And I've got some colleagues in here also as well, which is great to see, where I was buying, building, and investing in HR tech companies. So some of them that you might have seen, VeteryHire.com, General Assembly, we're all kind of bringing them into our group. And then I moved from London to California to set up EQ because I saw more and more people at the top, but less and less people who look like me. And I came from a non-traditional background, so it's about unlocking more and more doors. So really glad to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Marcus. DEI was something that a lot of people, both in the room and on the live stream, asked about, so we'll get to that. But George, I'd like to start with you. We're in some interesting macroeconomic dynamics, let's call them. And the question is, how does that macroeconomic climate make you think differently about talent acquisition, recruiting? What are your thoughts there?
It's a very confusing time. That would probably sum it all up. Before I talk about zooming out and looking at the big numbers, let me first say that it's a very challenging time. And while the big numbers all sound really good, it doesn't necessarily translate to everybody's living room or kitchen table, as they say. So zooming out, the U.S. economy is outperforming every modern economy in the world by any metric that you could look at. The jobs numbers, the labor numbers have become this new strategic asset for the Federal Reserve to counter and balance inflation. The reaction of the job market, or the new type of reaction by the job market to the economy, is something I've never seen in my lifetime. The unemployment, we're basically still, even with the jobs numbers eking down slowly, which again is by design, we're still at basically full employment. The GDP is at 2.1% gross domestic product, which is a growth number. That's sort of that's from there and above is where everybody likes to see it. So all of that sounds rosy, yet the headlines and the feeling that I have, that we all have, is what a challenging time it is. It's also different because the folks that are getting hurt are the most in this phase, this cycle, are the knowledge workers. That's, we see the layoffs in tech, in big tech. If you're in the trades on the front line, your wages are spiking more rapidly or just spiking. If you're a software engineer, the heyday at the moment is over, and it may come back, but it's very different. We usually would see the trades and frontline workers get impacted, take the brunt first, and as it goes through, the back office, things are moving toward a recovery. So that's why I think we feel that way a lot. And what's changing, the question was really, what are those trends? The trends that we talk about, the skills shortage, the lack of people to do the jobs, the ratio of employment age individuals to retired, these trends have been coming for decades, and they're things that we've all been, for as long as you've been in recruitment or in HR, You've been talking about it, looking at it. You know, the War for Talent book was like in the late 90s. And what's happened is it's become it's become clear and visible to the C-suite that these issues actually exist. And so I think the big change is that for maybe the first time, we have the promise of, you know, people being our biggest asset, being a little bit more than lip service for those people in the workforce. And I think we're seeing changes in how we attract talent, hire talent, retain talent based on that.
We'll come back to some of those, and thank you for setting that context. I want to stay at a macro, and Gerry, this is a question for you, because in this environment, we're also seeing a lot of shifts, transformations, changes to talent acquisition professionals themselves. These are people in your community that you've spent your career advocating for and interacting with. What's your point of view about the transition that talent acquisition talent, HR professionals, are going through, and how can we as a community help them?
Well, first of all, talent acquisition folks, I think that the logjam is coming a little bit undone if we look at some of the larger economic pieces to that. But the pressure is on and has been on for some time. And there's no question in my mind that a lot of people are just reacting to the fact that the amount of change, the speed of change, the degree to which new things are being engaged is really impacting how people are doing their job, how they're satisfied with their job, and the outcomes of some of those jobs. We've lost a huge number of not only recruiters in the short run, but also recruiting leaders. One issue that surprises me is I've never seen in my history this many recruiting leaders looking for a job and competing for them. I do think it's getting better, so I'll say that. But the fact of the matter is, I think a lot of companies are looking for extreme improvements in productivity and efficiency at the expense, if you will, of the kind of engagement and satisfaction and contentment that we would have if we're doing the best job we can do. And I think therein lies a little bit of the problem. There's still a lot of people who are working, but we don't see the engagement level improving a hell of a lot in relation to them doing that. So they're working, but they're not necessarily happier in relation to it. And I think what happens is this impacts literally all the people that those recruiters then are hiring. And when we're talking about those kinds of numbers, there's some really interesting issues here.
I'd invite anyone else on the panel to build on that, offer a comment. Yeah, Deborah,
Yeah, I
you
think
have a point of view.
from a talent acquisition perspective right now, there's fear for the first time that I've not witnessed before. As Gerry was saying, you know, there's so much going on right now within organizations, call it a reset, calling right size. But there's a lot of really great, talented individuals that sit at their desk and are not sure if they're going to have a job tomorrow. Is there going to be another impact? Is there going to be another layoff? What's the forecast going to look like for my organization? There's no clear path and understanding of what that future looks like. And unfortunately, you know, the talent acquisition teams are getting hit the most. And I know for sure, you know, people have been out of work for 4, 5, 6 months, a year, and they're still looking for opportunities. I feel like the individuals that are currently in those roles, recruiters, you know, because of that fear, they're doing everything possible to appease the hiring manager. Like, how can I get this position filled ASAP? If it's someone that they actually know, great, I'll put them into that seat. And I think because of that fear, there is a lack of true empathy for candidate experience. There's doesn't seem to be a lot of care for it anymore. And maybe that's just our environment right now. How many times have you gone on social and someone posts a picture and someone says it's great, and then you have 10 people afterwards putting that picture to shame. There just seems to be so much animosity that's happening right now, and I feel that way right now.
So rethinking recruiting might require a little more empathy for the people in recruiting, for the candidate experience. That's great. I wasn't surprised to have the number one question among our registrants be about, I don't know, something on the fear to excitement spectrum, depending upon where you sit. But Marcus, this is a question for you. It's about AI. Is it going to take away jobs? Is it going to help us do the things that only humans can do more? But the questions were really around, how's it changing talent and recruiting? What do you think the opportunities or watch-outs or both are?
Yeah, so it's a very broad topic, and I think everybody's trying to get to grips with the definitions firstly. So as we know, everyone's kind of talking about AI, and a lot of this has actually been around for some time, but not the more advanced stuff. So we can talk about ChatGPT and things that people are using and seeing. Now, the impact now that you have like a consumer-facing product where people can use it in their day-to-day work and companies can see it, I've just started this acceleration on why do I need to hire for this particular role or for this particular position. And maybe we can take some simple examples for roles that you might have hired before or had a freelancer for, like copywriting and things of that nature. And you start to see that AI is able to perform at a certain level as a human being. In some regards, not so, but it's getting there. So I think it really depends on the market that you're in, the work that you're doing. But some of the things that I think about, so we've started building large language models, inclusive AI. We were using it internally a lot, and we've now exposed it to our customers to help them with some of the areas that they would find as administrative or maybe a little bit more mundane, to really give them superpowers. So I think as an individual, the best thing that you can do is really start to spend a lot of time learning what the tools are that are out there, being honest with yourself around your job and what could be automated and what could not be automated. Because if you don't think about how it could be automated yourselves, somebody in your organization will at some point. But I also think that there's a huge opportunity. And I absolutely believe that jobs are going to change. I believe that we will lose jobs, but we won't lose people. And so the question is what do people then do? And if you're proactive around it and you start to think about how could your job be more advanced, or you could enhance your role or do better work if you leverage the tools that exist today in a proactive way and start socializing that. So there's a lot in AI, so we're obviously not going to be able to cover it all now, but I think that it's definitely something that's topical and we should all be thinking about, especially in knowledge work, and acting on, like practically just trying all the tools that exist, understanding them, speaking to friends and colleagues, seeing what they're going through. And I know that there's a lot of people, like a secret society of people that are using AI every day in their work and they won't tell people. We all know that that's happening, and that's happening every single day. And I think that's going to continue to move forward. But it will also start to be an open discussion now, and I think we need to have that to help each other along the journey.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from the audience here in New York or from our panelists?
I got a lot on this.
Yeah, Gerry, go for it.
You know, if you this people issue, we will lose people, but we're also going to gain people. Anybody who tries to recruit the way I learned to recruit many, many years ago would be totally obsolete. They wouldn't even imagine what that looked like. I don't even bother to explain what it looked like to me in those days. And the way we recruit today, if you continue to do that in the next 5, 10 years, you will lose your job. You will just be not a recruiter. That's not what recruiters will be doing. And part of the challenge for all of us is how do we upskill to be more involved in other issues that we haven't been involved in the past. The degree to which we are fully transparent about what goes on in our company, about the skills, knowledge, and experience of the hiring manager that you are trying to convince somebody that they might want to select. So improving the decision process of the candidate by being more transparent is something that we have not done as recruiters in the long run. We are going to have to look at a whole new set of skills, knowledge, and experience as recruiters that fundamentally will change that job. And those that upskill for that level will certainly, there'll be more opportunities within that framework because we're going to be expanding our ability to influence what goes on in that organization. But are we going to be interviewing candidates? I don't know. At some point, if 1,000 people were to apply to a job, how many of those actually do get interviewed? Not many at all, but what if we had tools that allowed simultaneously hundreds of people to be able to get up to bat, and that it was fairer by their perception to be handled that way, to be managed that way, and that they felt better about competing more effectively. So those things are not going to be done by humans. They will be done in a whole different set of ways. And so we need to look at who's going to oversee that, make sure that the biases involved are in fact mitigated to the point where the candidate understands what's going on and believes that the process is a fair process. So those are the kinds of things that I think
Marcus,
we're going
you
to
had a
have to deal
follow-up?
with.
Yeah, I just want to add one. I was thinking about how can we compare AI to anything that we've seen in our lifetimes, and I think the closest thing that I hear is I was in a conference in Atlanta this week just with people focused on these topics, and it's almost like the dawn of the internet. So when the internet came around, there was a lot of more jobs that are created, things like DICE, DHI, and all the things that we use, and it changed everything and the way that we do business. It's the same thing. If you are stuck in the dark ages, you may have opportunities, but they're going to be opportunities that might be the jobs that you don't want to do. So I would really try and get up to speed with that as quick as possible. And me saying that, when I think about it, it's like, what does that mean? How do you get up to speed to it? Speak to people and be less secretive about it. We've got a community of people where we have these conversations, and I think that's super important for you to be doing.
It's a great analogy, and the fact is when the internet began to have an impact, corporations basically said, we're not going to play. Yeah. We're scared of that, so we're, especially newspapers, they could see the end. But the fact of the matter is, today, with ChatGPT and others, many corporations have basically told their employees, you're not allowed to use it. So obviously people are doing it secretly. If you're not doing secretly, you're missing something. But it's really the point, because fundamentally there's no law that says you cannot learn something. And you should be experimenting with a variety of different ways in which you could use it for strategy, for efficiency, for whatever, and recognize some of the flaws and how it's evolving and changing. But I absolutely agree. This is going to be a sea change. Already, most of the vendors and suppliers of services are talking about or making claims about their new ability to use AI in relation to the outcomes of what tools you are using. Who's verifying those claims? 90%, 95% of them being verified by the company itself. Yeah. So you got a real smart developer there. That's really great. Is anybody other than that doing that? I'm seeing about 4 or 5% hiring other vendors to now deal with that issue. And of course, you pay me enough, I'm going to verify that that's a really good claim. So there's some suspicion around that as well. I think eventually we're going to have more standards in terms of methodology that will come out of it. But this is an evolving world at this point, and if you're not embracing it, there's going to be an issue.
George, you have a point?
Yeah, I think those are all great analogies, but the thing that's different about and I worked for BB&N when the internet came out. Bolt, Brannick, and Newman, they built the ARPANET that became the internet. So I'll say I was there, but I wasn't in the room. I was just a recruiter. The difference is the rate of adoption. So looking at all of the trends over the years, any trend in our space, there's about a 10-year window. Even the trends that feel a little bit more simplistic, like social recruiting, it took about 5 to put us on a track to know where it was going, and after 10 years, we kind of understand really how it's been adopted and how it's being used. ChatGPT came out, and overnight, 100 million users, and it keeps going. It's flattened out, but it's growing. That's not to say that it's ChatGPT that is going to change the world. But the biggest thing, I was talking with a colleague today, and the biggest thing that ChatGPT has done, in my opinion, currently, is opened up the minds of every leader and every employee and every human who has access to it, to how can I use this in my business, in my life. And what that's leading to is another theme that relates to something Gerry said. It's, if I'm the CEO or the CFO or the VP of anything, how can I do more with less by leveraging this? That's the theme of the day, do more with less. So they're not laying off 50% of the recruiters in an organization and saying, and the rest of you all get to work 50% less. They're asking you to do more with less. And it's going to be technology like this that does it, where I think corporations are saying, don't use ChatGPT. That's a security thing, a privacy thing. But trust me, they are saying, how can we leverage large language models? How can we leverage generative AI? How can we leverage AI in general to automate, drive productivity, be more efficient? And that's where I think the guidance to explore, become the person that understands how to leverage this, understand it in your day-to-day is really key.
And George, you were talking about how some of the macroeconomic, looks rosy, but it's a confusing time. Tech talent, which is what we care for and advocate for on DICE, they want to go work for companies that are embracing new technologies. So it's another reason to rethink recruiting. And, as these new, exciting, fearful, wherever you are on the spectrum, capabilities are coming into the world of work, let's embrace them. Let's create radical transparency, which, Deborah, I know you are a massive fan of when it comes to the candidate experience, and would invite you in to share your thoughts on that. But we know, and we can see on our platform, that candidates who are highly sought after already have AI skills, have already had AI titles, and are looking for companies who, like becoming a digital worker, are now going to help them become a modern AI tech-enabled worker.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I think about AI, and it hasn't been around. I mean, it's been around for a really long time. I think 1954 was when it first came out. It was, what problem can it solve? And so, from a recruiter perspective, as a TA leader, I'm like, how could I use AI to solve current problems within talent acquisition? And for me, and from what I see as a candidate myself, is that AI could definitely be put into a situation where it's talking to people. It's bridging that gap of communication where recruiters may not have enough time during their day to actually have these conversations. Well, now that it has natural language processing abilities, we could have AI do that. And what does that do? It gives the recruiter freed up time to focus on what they need to focus on. That's really important. but then also allows the candidate experience to be more enhanced because the candidate now feels like they're having a conversation with the organization, something that they've not had in the past. And we see that right now, how many people are applying to the same position and never hear back from the organization. And what you hear most is the recruiters like, I just can't get through 500 people. Well, maybe AI can. Maybe AI is the solution to that problem.
Just to add to the topic, and I think that there are many potential use cases for this, and that's also part of the challenge, like where do you start? And back to what you said, Deborah, like what problem is it solving? And I think that there's a huge opportunity to take away some of the administration that you do in recruiting, so you spend more time actually speaking to people. Because a lot of that time, that's where you get that rich information and rich knowledge, and you build that experience with that individual who's going to be in your company. So I'm going to do an absolute shameless plug. If anybody wants to be part of an early access program to learn how to leverage AI specifically in recruiting in a kind of chat GPT style way, let me know, and I'll make sure that you're part of it, because I think it's really something that everyone here can leverage.
Do you want to remind everyone what your email or preferred communication vehicle is?
That's a good question. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Marcus Sawyerr, but also eq.app, EQ app. But I'll be here, and I'd love to speak to people as well, because I think that's important to understand.
And there are hundreds listening in, so thank you for that.
Thank you for the reminder.
One of the AI-related topics that we got a lot of questions on overlaps with DEIB, and maybe Marcus, you can kick us off here with how are we, it's a two-part question, right? Inclusive AI, so that we are removing bias from the machine as much as we can. And then more generally, how are we thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as recruiting teams, as recruiting strategies in this modern world of work?
Yeah, so I think too many times diversity becomes the number one word that people kind of pick out of all of those terms. And the first word for me is inclusion. And you don't get diversity if you're not inclusive. And I always give this analogy of like you're hosting an event, maybe at your house or at a party, and then people come over. How do you make them feel? And this is not only when you're hiring, but also when you bring people inside the organization, so making them feel included. And George and I, we were just having this discussion earlier, and I think that the shift, and we've had to actually make this shift on how we talk about DE&I inclusion so people get it, and it's not about being exclusive, but more embedding it into the DNA of what everyone does. Because the problem is, and Streetwise mentioned this earlier, you actually filter people out at the top of the funnel if you make it feel like they can't apply for that role or position. And this could be down to gender, it could be down to race, it could be down to skills or qualifications that you don't actually need to do the job. So I think a lot of the inclusivity starts right at the first level principles of when you're creating those requisitions and what you need, and it has to be embedded in your DNA. It can't be an afterthought, and that's going to take time, but there are some companies that really care about it and are making the steps in order to move forward to it.
Any other thoughts on DEIB from the panel?
Yeah, I would pick up on the embedded point. That's the conversation we were having. And so I mentioned that we define the WorkTech category, and there are 6 core tenets of WorkTech. WorkTech's inclusive of HR tech and recruitment tech, but not all of it. And that's where these 6 core tenets come into play. So I'm not going to go through them. I'm just going to mention one that I mentioned to Marcus, which is inclusivity is embedded. So it is in the algorithms, in the systems, and it is. I think part of the challenge we're having in the market right now with the vendors that I work with that went to market with a diversity and inclusion specific app is that they're pigeonholed when actually what they're doing is helping you be a better recruiter. You're hiring better people faster. And they're getting pigeonholed. The budgets, unfortunately, are drying up around DE&I. And from a business perspective, that technology, that solution that you're providing, inclusivity, has to be a given. And I know you feel the same way. I mean, it's tone deaf to come to market in this market.
It's
with something that is
not just technology, though. It's policies and systems that exist in existing corporations in a significant way. Among my members of more than 100 very large companies, if I ask them, and I have on a regular basis, which of you are sharing data about the diversity of the pool, the demographics of the pool, that you have spent time, energy, and effort putting together for this job? And 50% of those companies out there of the Fortune 500 will tell you, we don't let recruiters know about that. 50% say, we do. And the ones that don't are risk averse because they're afraid of what will happen. And I'm going, yeah, but you have a commitment and you've hired people who are committed to being more inclusive, committed to trying to build a slate that is representative. And the fact of the matter is you're making it harder for me because I can't access any of the data at the recruiter level. At the C level, yeah, everybody's having great conversations about how good we are, how bad we are, or some of the other issues that are going on. So the policies have to reflect a level of transparency throughout an organization. So the hiring manager knows whether this pool at this time, you want me to hire in 5 days, I can hire in 5 days. I can get you to hire in 5 days, but I may not be able to get a representative sample of really quality candidates that support some of those that are underrepresented. I need 10 days, I need 2 weeks, I need 3 months, whatever it might be. Are we being transparent within that organization, and are we sharing at all levels? That's going to be a key issue from my perspective. So we have to attack not just the issues around the technology, but we have to really understand that we have become very comfortable trying to create efficiencies that say, well, you've got 5 days to be able to put together a pool of candidates, but that may not mean I can reach and communicate with as many people as I would like to be able to have a great pool from which I can get a slate of candidates that you can apply to. And so we're going to have to share more data. We're going to have to better understand what that representation exists in given jobs, in given geographic areas, and obviously a broader kind of world now that we can work from anywhere. But the fact of the matter is we need to have that data so that we can invest in being able to have a great set of candidates that hiring managers need to deal with. And then we need to audit the outcome. Not wait for some class action suit, but we need to be auditing that outcome in real time. And over time, I need to be able to go to a hiring manager and say, well, this is the 5th job this year that you've had that's very similar, and we've given you great slates, 40% diverse, and you've hired as 0. We need to be able to have those skills to be able to confront those issues and have great conversations within corporations. And I know how awkward it is for recruiters to be able to have that data and then step up and make sure that we're engaging around that. That's going to be the future, I think, in terms of where we're going to be going.
I'm seeing radical transparency operating at a lot of levels in this conversation. Thank you, Gerry. Deborah, did you have an add to that?
Yeah, I do, because this is a big topic for me. I'm very keen and focused on data, and what Gerry had mentioned is data is so important, and it's so transparent, it's real, it's fact. And at one of my organizations, we did a lot of really great things to invest in our diversity initiatives, but nobody was tracking the ROI around any of those initiatives. So we had to be intentional. What's the throughput of us going and spending $200,000 a year on going to this particular professional association if we're not figuring out how many people are we hiring? And in just a couple of months, I had determined at one of my organizations that we had only hired 2 people for the entire year, and we spent like $250,000 on all these events, and we were still hiring a lot of people. And the problem, though, was that we were just not being intentional with the people that were coming to these events. They would come into this great big database of candidates, and we would share them out with recruiters and say, here's your pool of people, go through them. But recruiters are using a sort of quasi-AI, Boolean, to filter out keywords on individuals' resumes. And sometimes individuals don't have the best profiles, don't have the best resumes. So we were intentional. We hired a diversity team to speak to people, to actually have communication, that conversation with these individuals, to assess potential. And in just 1 year, 900% increase in diverse hires because we were being intentional, because we were communicating.
And if we allow some awkward questions to be had, so my fantasy is that no matter who I am, I should be able to sit, if I'm competing for a job, and say, how many people like me have you hired in the last 5 years, and where are they now? I would suspect you haven't heard that too often. But fundamentally, I think almost everybody would like to be asking that question at some point.
I've actually had more and more candidates asking some version of that question in the last, really since March of 2020. I don't know what about COVID might have triggered awareness in this area, but
The one thing everybody is able to ask now is about pay. We've made it legitimate in the last 5 years to be fully transparent across a lot of boundaries in being able to ask about pay before I have to tell you what I'm making. And in most places, it's because it's getting increasingly illegal. But the fact of the matter is, that is the one area that I've seen significant movement in terms of pay transparency. But it's been a decade in coming. In terms of the conversation, in terms of the rationale, and in terms of now 49 out of 50 states are fully committed to pay equity.
I'm going to make a little bit of a shift, but it connects to some of what Deborah, especially you were just talking about. A lot of the questions we received before the event started had to do with engaging passive candidates and creative ideas for sourcing. So despite efficiency and a lot of talent on the market, there is still a war for talent out there. George, you talked about this. It's the case now, and it was in the 90s when that term was coined. What are our thoughts about passive candidate engagement in this new world? What are our thoughts about creative sourcing and how that might look a little different, or how we can rethink that?
Yeah, no, this is great because this is my wheelhouse. It's been, through my own journey these past couple of months, one of the things I wanted to make sure of is, does an organization really care about that passive candidate? You can get to a career site, you can go to, look at the jobs. If you find a job that fits your background, you apply to those positions and then pray. The one thing that I always look for, though, is what if there is no job currently at that organization? What do I do next? How do I let this organization know I'm still interested in your company? And so, there's been a rise of talent communities that are like a part of, or a database part of, the career section. What I've found so far, out of 179 companies, and these are companies primarily New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania area, 37% actually have talent communities. So what does that mean to me is that organizations need to do a better job at inviting candidates that may not be able to apply to that organization. Why do we want a talent community? Because we want to nurture those individuals. We want to send them content that is relevant to that individual's needs, whether or not it's jobs or newsletters or events that are happening, cultural community service awareness. But we have a lot of work to do within talent acquisition around talent communities.
Marcus, I have a question for you. You might be preemptively answering it, but tech unemployment is still really low, and you're focused on, more diverse tech talent and helping us all achieve that. How do you think about engaging passive, diverse tech talent, creative sourcing, how to reach into communities and be relevant as we're looking at attracting that talent?
Yeah, so to Deborah's point, actually, when we started EQ, which is now EQ app, it was EQ community, and it was built on a community on what we call the 4 Cs, which is ensuring that you have access to connections, so you're connecting with one another. You have a community that is supporting you in different aspects of your life. Maybe you've just got a general question or something you want to learn about. And you have careers that are meaningful. And ultimately, if you get those first 3, it should lead to the final C, which is capital. So we thought about building that community in that way where people could connect, have conversations, and they were kind of business casual, if you like. So it's not Facebook, it's not LinkedIn, but it's somewhere in between. And we didn't actually always have jobs for them, but the reason we done that was we found that people, I think it was about 30% for the clients that we were working with, were always attracting their talent through referral. So we almost became the company's 3rd referral. And I think that's one way that you can do it, to Deborah's point, building communities. But I'm less about the content and more about connecting people and connecting peers so they get value from it. And then the other thing I would say is there are a lot of these group communities that exist, which is something else that we're spending time on, which we're exposing to our clients to say, hey, you can go in the source and you can find these very niche communities that you wouldn't find on Google because they're hard to find otherwise. And then how do you embed yourself in them and also becoming a host? People always talk about, how do I get my brand out there? How do I market? 2 things I'd always prescribe: write a newsletter, write a blog, talk about something you're passionate about so people come to you, or host something. And those are kind of 2 ways that you can do things, even as a talent acquisition professional, or just an individual that wants to maybe get into that space or looking for a new opportunity.
I'm really heartened to hear the 3 Cs, with capital being the 4th, but the connections, community, capital, or connections, community, and careers. Thank you. It's the end of the day here in New York, and it's been very hot today, so I think my brain is tired. But this is the vision for Clearance Jobs and Dice, not just to list jobs and have people express interest in them, but to create spaces. And in fact, that's what we're doing. We're recruiters and talent companies, people in them, talent, the people who might want to be in those companies or didn't even know, to have the opportunity to connect like we would in social media and just have human conversations. Because the path to join a company or to think about your career isn't short. So we recognize this, and we're trying to build out some of those opportunities. All right. We have come to the wrap-up phase, and I just ask each of our panelists to share your thoughts on the road ahead for recruiting. We're here to talk about rethinking recruiting. We've covered a lot of subjects: macroeconomic, DEIB, AI, candidate experience from where you sit and the experience that you're bringing. What does it look like ahead to you? And we'll start with you, Gerry, and work our way down to Marcus.
No problem. I think it's an extraordinary step ahead. I wouldn't be here. I'd be well retired. But I got to tell you, it's the most exciting time to be doing what we do. With all of the problems and challenges, they are just that. They're challenges. There's exciting ways in which we are impacting the lives of people around us. Every single person that expresses an interest in your company's job is somebody that you do have an impact on, whether or not you take it as seriously as you should. We tend to have serious problems in those folks we're not going ahead with. That's something like 99% of the people that you deal with are people that you're not going forward with. And that is an opportunity that's a serious mistake in our history, and fundamentally one that technology is helping us to potentially change. And a lot of what's coming, I think, is going to allow us to change. And if we think about the satisfaction we have over many, many years, it's not just that we put someone in a seat who's succeeded. There are an awful lot of people who are silver medalists. So those of you who have gone back and found silver medalists that you've gone back to and you've reacquainted with yourself or reacquainted over time and fundamentally brought into your organization, it's very satisfying. But we are still missing a huge number. And I think that's really where the tremendous opportunity is for us. And it's where, as Marcus has been talking about, the community that you're trying to build, there's a community of people within that framework that offer some incredible opportunities for us if we can figure out how to do that. And I do think that that's coming. So I am very passionate about the fact that the next few years, I think it's going to be 2 or 3, we're going to see some significant new ideas that are being executed on. And I do think that from my perspective, as if I were a recruiter today, I would be enormously excited about how I decide, not my boss, not my employer, how I decide what I'm going to learn and where I'm going to learn it, and I'm going to invest in myself. I would be spending my money going to the kinds of conferences or some of the events that are available to me. And I'm speaking to you folks chose to be here. There are thousands of recruiters who, by and large, are nose to the grindstone and not going anywhere. You will.
Inspirational words from our lifelong learner on the panel. Deborah, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we are at the edge of TA evolution. For a really long time, I feel like TA has been grinding away. They're exhausted. We hear about burnout all the time. And they've lost that loving feeling. Oh, I've lost that love. but it's true. I mean, there are people that just, they don't want to go to work anymore. They don't want to try. They don't want to care. And if they don't care, then they're not going to communicate with people. They just want to push the paper around and have someone else do it. I think with the dawn of ChatGPT and the evolution of other AI tools, it may give them a new tool in their arsenal that sparks that joy again, to give them a voice, to get ahead of the grind and the hard work, because maybe part of the work could be handled by technology. And that we'll find that renewed interest and we'll find that better candidate experience. So I think that we're at that precipice, that cliff, and it's exciting for me because I'm just like, oh, I got to get into this. I got to, if my mom can learn how to, play Words with Friends on a phone, I can learn this as well.
And especially if it opens up more time, as Marcus said, to spend more time talking with people. I think that so much of what talent acquisition and HR and human capital management is about is people and that empathy that you were speaking with. If we can focus more of our time there, it's an exciting road ahead.
And we're already seeing some organizations kind of evolve already. You hear less about talent acquisition and more about people experience.
Yes.
And that's where we're going, is people experience. We need people to experience what it's like to work for that organization. What's the culture like? Am I going to like it there? Is this a place I want to live?
Yeah, great. Thank you. George, your wrap-up thoughts.
Sure. So I'm the tech trend representative here today, so I'll focus a little bit on that. And I think a lot of the opportunity and the challenge, I like the way you put it, these challenges are they're opportunities for us all. So my advice to everyone here and everybody online is look for these opportunities first by understanding all of this change and this technology. So let me give you a really useful example. I've just completed a tour of all of the technologists and service organizations that of any concern that are focused on recruitment, marketing, and branding. Why? Because I see how people are going to find information, how they're going to experience in this case, jobs, how those results are going to be delivered, how they're going to interact with those jobs, those job listings. It's all changing, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And in a very interesting way, it brings us right back to employer brand and experience. Why? Because in order for you to be in whatever Google decides the results are going to look like in the future, you need to have organic content. You better be reflecting a brand. It can't, when I say organic, it can't be written by ChatGPT or Bard, because they see that. So I might be looking, if I'm in talent acquisition leadership, I might be thinking about the future if I need to hire people, or if I'm looking to protect my job or advance my career, for how do I get ahead on that. If I'm a sourcer, I might be thinking about what's the next wave in data and analytics, because a lot of the things that we promised before, the aspirational stuff around technology, is available today. And I think sourcing is an area that's about to get flipped on its head, because I can put together a tech stack that can tell you where are the people, what are their demographics, what is their educational background. But I can go further now. I can tell you what skills are available. Then I can take technology and I can tell you how should we communicate to these folks, what's working and what isn't. I can build a community, but it's got to be the people driving this. It's the humans that understand this that can leverage this technology. So I might be thinking about my role just as sourcing moved from like Boolean search strings to candidate engagement, or added, it's going to move to how can we leverage technology to build this community. Just a couple of examples, but I think this is a great time to be here, and it's time to look forward and discover this for yourself.
Well, you're speaking to my marketing heart, because this is a lot of what we're now able to do with our communities and buyers of whatever products and services. We can see intent. We can engage them with meaningful content far in advance of any decision that we're hoping that they will make. And it just creates a very different experience and relationship, and provides the opportunity to think longer term, right? Not just the immediate goals to fill a position. I think that's exciting.
Yeah.
And I think HR, talent acquisition, and marketing need to become best friends. That's what I think.
There you go. And I think recruitment has always, the analogies between recruitment and marketing and sales, where they fall down is where, because it's a job, because it's a person and a career, I think now the tools exist, and we didn't have the resources in recruitment.
Right.
Building a content library, you didn't have those resources, most companies. Now with this technology, you've got those resources.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Right. Marcus, your thoughts?
So my thoughts are that everybody in this room and everybody who's listening in are all builders. And you've all built something. And the easiest way to predict the future is to build it or be part of building it. So especially in the recruiting industry. And if I look at the opportunities, there are two clear opportunities. One, let's remove all of the unwanted administration from the recruiting process so you can spend more time speaking to the best and the most relevant candidates for the roles that you're trying to hire for. And two, spend more time with the people that you want to by building community. And I think if you do those two things, the future's going to be exciting, bright, warmth, and then there's going to be a lot of depth.
And that's amazing. What purposeful work we all have ahead of us. Talent is, I think, the most important and competitive differentiator that companies have. No offense to the tech, to the toothpaste and its whitening agents, or whatever it is that the company has built. So, thank you all in the room and all on the live stream, and all those who will listen to the recording as we put it out there for people to partake in. And especially thank you, Gerry, Deborah, George, Marcus, for your time, for your thoughts, for your advocacy for this moment in our world, in our changing world, and helping us to rethink recruiting. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the experience here in the room, and good afternoon, good evening online.